In today's session, we're going to learn how Cardinal Health moved thousands of VMs to GCP. My name is Joe Timmons, and I'm with the Google Cloud Professional Services organization. I will be joined today by Issy Ben-Shaul, an engineer in the Google engineering, and a co-founder of Velostrata, as well as Verzi, the lead cloud engineer from Cardinal Health. From our agenda, we're going to be diving in first as a baseline into the cloud migration introduction and concepts. Then we're going to look at Anthos-Migrate, which is a new announcement that was announced earlier this week, which is the next iteration of Velostrata. Then we're going to look at the Cardinal Health experience and what they did to migrate thousands of VMs in a short amount of time, and the lessons learned and what you guys can learn from that in your organizations. And then finally, we're going to take a look ahead at the roadmap of our migration tooling. So before we dive in, just show of hands, how many of you in the audience are getting ready to do a large-scale migration to GCP? Wow, pretty good. How about those of you that are doing cloud-to-cloud migration, as well as on-prem into cloud? Awesome. Well, the reason I bring that up first is I've been in professional services for hyperscale cloud organizations now for almost 5 years, and the conversations that I am having today compared to what I was having 5 years ago are an order of magnitude different from the perspective of where public cloud is as a priority for IT. 4.5 years ago, a public cloud, it was all about experimentation, getting your feet wet, trying to understand how to leverage public cloud. Fast forward to today, and it's all about mission-critical workloads, moving entire data centers to the cloud, and how we can do it quickly, faster, and efficiently. And that's where Velostrata comes into play. I also want to take a look beyond my firsthand observations at this survey. This is a recent survey of IT cloud professionals, and they were asked, what are your top IT cloud initiatives for 2019? The first one, not surprisingly, is the things that I got into the public cloud. I want to optimize their cost and save my organization money. But the other two are very relevant to today's session. The second being, I want to move more workloads, right? And the third is I want to more quickly adopt containers. Containers are the new VM. And everybody's aware of how exciting they are and all of the benefits that you get from running GKE. But let's imagine for a second you wanted to take your first ever trip to Europe. Would you just jump on the airplane and go? I don't think so. You would do some research. You would buy a travel guide. Your cloud migration journey is no different. You want to learn from professionals who have been there, who have done that, who have seen it. And that's where Google Cloud Professional Services and all of Google is here to help you with that journey. Especially when you see a metric like on this slide, where 94% of respondents to this survey said that they face some sort of cost overrun or some sort of timing challenge with their migration journey. Some of the aspects that we like to highlight when considering your own migration journey are like at the top here where it says scale. So are you guys going to approach it from just a few VMs, a few workloads, or are you considering an entire data center move to the public cloud? Multi-source, so where are the workloads coming from? Are you looking at bare metal? Are you looking at virtualized in your data center? Or are you looking at other clouds potentially that, for whatever reason, you want to move that to GCP? The next attribute you want to consider is complexity of the workload. So is it a multi-tier app? Is it a monolith? What is it that you're wanting to move up into the cloud, and how does that impact your migration timelines and expertise that you need at the table to do it successfully? And then finally, risk. So, most people, when they want to move VMs to the cloud, they do it in waves. So let's imagine on a Friday night during a change window, you wanted to move some VMs, and one of them doesn't move correctly and gets hung up. Do you have a mechanism to roll that back and not impact your application owners and not impact your business, right? Because you want to do your migration, but you also don't want to do it in a disruptive manner. And then the one thing that's not on this slide I want to highlight is don't forget about the people and process aspects as well. So involve your application owners, right? Make sure that the first time they hear about your VM migrations is not an email the week before, right? You want to involve them early so that they understand the value proposition, why you're doing it to make their applications better, their application development processes better, and their businesses more reliable and performant. You guys have probably seen this slide a lot this week, and this is our methodology for migrations. And the reason we use this a lot is because it works, right? We have driven improvement, and this is from being in the field and learning and seeing multiple organizations approach public cloud, and it's the best way to approach it. So if one of you called me tomorrow and said, Joe, you know, I would love your professional services team to help us move out of our data center next month, I would start with this exact methodology. I would start with a discovery. What do you have? What are the workloads, right? What do your applications look like? How interdependent are they on the other applications? Next, we would look at your GCP foundations, right? You have to build a really solid foundation for the success of your overall GCP initiative. And from experience, I will tell you that the primary areas that you really want to focus on around foundations are security and networking. You have to get your ingress, your egress figured out correctly, and you obviously have to include your security team to make sure that you adopt cloud in a way that conforms with your organization's security controls. Okay, so let's you know, you got your applications figured out, you've got your landing zone and your foundation built. Now you need to start migrating workloads, and that's really what today's session is all about, the tools that we have to offer you to accelerate that. And I'm going to hold that thought into my next slide. And then finally, optimization. So once you get the workloads there into the public cloud, what can you do to make things better? And this isn't always just about the app. You know, here at Google, we invented site reliability engineering. So maybe you want to take your operations team and make them think more of in a cloud manner versus an on-prem manner. Maybe you want to reinvigorate your CI/CD or DevOps processes, or even start to refactor your applications into microservices. And let's double click into migration. So what are some of the methods that you can adopt when considering how you're going to migrate, right? So the two most common that we see are rehost and replatform, where we see around 70% of organizations approaching it this way. And you know, this is traditional lift and shift, right? And this is typically the chosen method because it's all about speed. It's all about, I want to get my workloads to the cloud as quickly as I can and efficiently as I can. And this is the sweet spot of Velostrata and why so many organizations use it in their GCP migrations. The second is all about lift and modernize, right? So earlier this week, we introduced the next iteration of Velostrata, Anthos-Migrate. And to talk more about that tech and how Anthos-Migrate works, I want to invite my friend Issy to the stage. Issy?
Okay, thank you. Oh, hello, everyone. Thanks for coming for the session today. Thanks, Joe. I will talk in this session about, my section, about how Anthos-Migrate actually performs the migration and what it does, and we'll leave enough time for my partner, Louis, to talk about how they actually use the system in order to migrate thousands of VMs. And we'll focus here on the kind of Anthos-Migrate, just for terminology's sake, is actually the broad name for all replacing Velostrata. I might be confusing myself now when I'm talking. I'm still used to Velostrata, but Anthos-Migrate refers to both the ability to move VMs in a lift and shift, as well as the new capability that was introduced today, which I will talk about more towards the end of the session in the roadmap. So how does it actually work? So essentially, the way that Anthos-Migrate is deployed is you take basically a virtual appliance that you deploy on premises. And from then on, there is another set of appliances. This is what you see on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we automatically deployed in a scalable fashion a set of 2 or more instances that are basically are termed cloud extension, but they are actually used as a sort of a proxy to the on-prem environment. And essentially what we do is once you set up a VPN and a VPC that is set up, ready to go and migrate at scale. So as Joe says, there is a discovery session that needs to take place early on. And basically, it ends up with identify a set of VMs, workloads, that need to migrate as a set into the public cloud or GCP. And this set of workloads can be either identified interactively through the vCenter plugin that we provide, or through what we call a runbook, which is a utility that does it in a batch form, or even through your own orchestration tool of your choice. Could be Ansible or any other orchestration tool that you have that can be actually using our API to orchestrate the solution. The bottom line, you have a set of workloads that you want to run and move and scale. So all you do is basically hit what's called running cloud. And when that happens, essentially all the VMs are shut down gracefully on premises using our on-premises Velostrata appliance, and then they're actually streamed consistently into the public cloud. And we do it in a way that in the matter of 5 to 10 minutes, those workloads are up and running in the cloud. Now, how could that be if they have a lot of databases and stateful data associated with that? That's the question that comes up. So in a native implementation, that would not work. So what we do here is actually we implemented one optimized transport layer that works in a way that even though the compute is running in the cloud and the storage is still remote, the performance is not degraded. We use things like predictive prefetch of workloads that need to come a priori before the users are using them, caching, of course, deduplication, compression, things that we've been working on for many years to actually optimize and reduce the impact of the latency. So the bottom line is you have a set of VMs are running, boot up natively in the cloud, while the storage is remote. And when you access the storage or the data, you access through the caching appliances that are in the cloud, and they fetch the data optimally from the remote storage. So this is basically brings you a set of VMs that operate in the cloud in minutes, right? Downtime for the production applications is minimal. It could be 5, 10 minutes, and they're up and running, which is very important for validation and for downtime purposes. You can be up and running. Now, once this is happening, in the background, we kick off a background process that actually starts to migrate the cold data, the data that is not being accessed right now by the applications, and it runs seamlessly without disrupting the operation of the overall workloads that are already running. Once the data completes its migration, we're ready to go to the next stage, which is the kind of conversion into completely cloud storage. But for everything, take the cache out, flushing it, and getting out of the data path, and then run natively. It's interesting, though, to know that we have many customers that are staying in this stage for a while because an interesting capability we offer is the ability to actually write back the data that is being generated in the cloud back to on-prem. Why do we do that? Because we want to allow customers to roll back if they need it, because for whatever reasons, the workload didn't work as expected. Didn't need performance SLAs, some misconfiguration, accessing too much component is on-prem, and latency is a problem, et cetera. And we've run into that, but the ability to roll back instantly gives you the option to move faster. I know that some customers, I think Cardinal as well, had like maybe 5% of the workloads rolled back, fixed, and then rolled forward. So it's a very interesting capability. However, when you're ready to cut the cord, so to speak, you can actually do the detach, convert to completely native storage, and off you go. So this is kind of, at a high level, the way that the system operates. And Luis will talk more about how this is being operationalized into a whole process in which you decide the sprints, et cetera. We'll let Luis elaborate on that. One thing that's really interesting about this solution, and is important for you, is that it's an agentless solution. So one thing we don't do, we don't install agents on the workloads, right? It's all done sort of under the covers through the hypervisor access to the storage. And what that means, you don't have to worry about opening firewall rules for those application workloads. You don't have to worry about compatibility with the antivirus and interference with workloads. As you know, I'm sure enterprise guys know that, if you can avoid agents, it's better. It also makes the whole cutover process much more easy and seamless. So that's kind of the solution in a nutshell. So let's move forward. One of the things that we invested in is making it really easy for enterprise customers to start off. And for that, we integrated it very nicely with the VMware vSphere. We have a vCenter plugin that plugs right into that and gives you the experience that you need. You really, if you're a VMware operator, you don't have to know much even about the cloud in order to start rolling those migrations. You get monitoring, logging, built, extended here, and everything is done through the vCenter console, both for operation as well as for monitoring and logging. As I said, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to, and you can still run from a web UI or from the runbook, but that's a very convenient option to start with. We also have a very interesting tool we call Rightsizing recommendation. What we found out is there are a lot of customers that are worried about cost, right? If I move like for like, my VMs are over-provisioning on-prem, usually because I don't have to pay for that over-provision. I pay for the host. When I move to the cloud, I'm going to be penalized because I'm going to pay for the instance, and I need to pay for the peak capacity in order to make sure that the performance is as needed. That's a problem, but really what happens is that you can actually, with the tool that we offer, you can actually inspect the actual use of those VMs, what are the CPU and RAM, usability and utility and utilization, and then with that, you can actually come up with a recommendation. So you see here, we recommend if you are cost optimized, you can actually cut the cost of by 5x compared to what you would have done if you just moved like for like in terms of the size of the instance. So it's another tool in our arsenal to help you make the migration more cost effective, which is something that many customers are always worried about. Some additional features are of interest. One thing that we really care about is make sure, again, that the risk of the migration is reduced. So we came up with this utility called test loan, which means you can test before you migrate. What does it mean? I can actually take a snapshot of your VMware environment and use that consistent snapshot as a way to stream it to the cloud and see if it works. So you don't disrupt at all the running applications. It's read-only copy of the data, and you can write it locally in the cloud. And you see if things work as they should work. If they don't, nothing happened. You didn't disrupt the application. So that is a very powerful tool that has been used very extensively by our customers. We have also an automation runbook. I'll let probably Louis talk more about it, but it's basically a way to do migration at scale. As you'll see by Louis' presentation, when you operate it properly, you can get into between 50 and 100 VMs that are actually migrated at once, and typically within a week. So it could be very effective with high throughput. We support things like site-level bandwidth throttling because sometimes customers obviously they don't have necessarily access to the QoS, and they need to control that. It's a secure, and we have also provide telemetry, very extensive set of counters for both monitoring and logging, which is, by the way, now integrated into Google Stack Driver, which give you visibility on performance, availability, and so on. In fact, this is actually a snapshot of our telemetry information, and I wanted to go and show you what does it look like in real-world scenario, taken from one of our customers. Assuming they went by the methodology that Joe referred to, you do discovery, planning, scheduling, and at the end of that period, you come up with a set of workloads that need to migrate as a whole, as a cluster. Once you do that, and you're ready to kick off the migration, this is using Velostrata. You can see that within literally 2 hours, we have about close to 80 VMs up running in GCP. This is typically what we see now. The green line is the actual data that counts in the background. But it's important to understand, realize that from the beginning, those are operational, right? They're running, they're operational, and then the data count may be a day or 2 days later until everything completes the migration, in which case you can detach when you're ready and move on. But if you do it in a pipeline fashion, you can get into a very, very nice cadence of moving, again, 80, 100 machines within 1 week. And this is how, for instance, Cardinal and other customers are able to move thousands of VMs within a relatively short period of time, within less than a year, with using this methodology. So just to wrap up, basically, if we kind of see what are the benefits of using the Anthos-Migrate for VM migration, is the following. The fact that we can stream workloads means that you can get quick validation and reduce downtime, and within minutes, you actually get your systems operated and run. By the way, this is vSphere, WebLogic, even SAP. So all the complex multi-tier workloads that are out there are supported and validated with a lot of customers that have used it in the past. So that's kind of one benefit. Then I mentioned it's an agentless solution, which means that the overhead, the labor they need to invest in order to get that solution working is dramatically lower. It's much seamless. It's very automated. All the transition from moving into on-prem into running in the cloud is completely automated, right? Injecting drivers that know how to work with the cloud storage, connecting the networks, removing some agents, et cetera, cleaning up the image. All this is done automatically. And that means that by certain measures, compared to traditional replication solutions with agents, it could be like easily 5 or to 10x less overhead on terms of that. I mentioned risk mitigation, critically important for enterprise CIOs. They need to make sure the uptime of their applications, and that's also very important. And the two tools are test before you migrate, which means that you can test everything before you actually decide to move your production workloads, or roll back if things don't go well in a matter of minutes. So this is also very important. And last but not least, the whole completion of the migration is about 5 to 6x compared to other solutions faster. You know, as many of you know, once you start on a journey of data center migration, what you want to do, you want to get it over with as soon as possible, because maintaining two infrastructures, paying for both, dealing with synchronization impacts is a real hassle, right? You'll be asked, you know, when are we done? When are we done? So the sooner you can get over with, the faster. And this is achieved through the, you know, all the things that we talked about. There's just a data point here of a customer of ours that moved 700 VMs, again, in 6 months, and we'll hear more from Luis about how they did it. So I think just to wrap up, you know, we've developed those best practices, determining the workloads for migration. Using discovery assessment is really important. I think Luis will reiterate it over that. Building the pipeline, automate it, and really get going. So with that, I want to invite Luis, and he'll tell you how actually they use the tool to do it in large scale. Come on, Luis. Oop.
Thank you, Issy. So I want to start off by telling you a little bit about who is Cardinal Health, because a lot of you may not recognize our company name, right? We're not out there. We don't do a lot of marketing. But we have over 50,000 employees throughout the world. We're a healthcare supplier for the most part. Supply chain is the big part of our industry, but we're moving a lot into data analytics and providing other solutions to the healthcare market. But we're really about making healthcare more efficient, providers more effective, and most important, patients as healthy as possible. We're number 14 on the Fortune 500, 136 billion in annual revenue. Our two primary business segments are pharmaceutical and medical. So what was our main goal for going to the cloud? And really, I'm sure everyone in this room can appreciate that healthcare costs are a primary concern in many people's minds, right? So keeping healthcare costs as low as humanly possible for the patients we support, cost is a huge factor in our line of business. So in addition to cost, the ability to move quickly and to be agile and to be able to respond to business needs were huge drivers in our decision to move to the cloud. How can we accomplish that? How can we accomplish those cost savings? We really were out to eliminate the inefficiencies that come with managing on-prem infrastructure. All the costs that are both visible and that aren't quite so visible. We looked at how many hours we spent, not just from our infrastructure teams, but our application teams, on firmware upgrades, patching, updating hardware, doing tech refresh. It was millions of dollars that the company was having to spend to keep all this infrastructure up to date and to keep it running. Just some inefficiency examples from an on-prem type environment. Hardware acquisition. It could take I'm sure you all have procurement processes that, you have a budget, you have to, apply for funding 6 months in advance to your budget year, and you hope that the $20 million that is available and $80 million worth of funding were requested. Are you going to be able to get any of that funding available? Those kind of things, right? And months to get hardware procured, to get it deployed. And everyone over-purchased because they didn't know how much they needed. They had to request that funding months or a year in advance. By the time they actually delivered a solution, there was no money left available to build upon that. So they'd just get as much as they possibly could to make sure that they had plenty of room. Application teams are slowed down significantly by unneeded cross-functional needs. We're a very siloed organization. If you needed a system built, there was 7 different teams you needed to engage to get that virtual machine up and running. And there's a lot of time that's lost in that too. So it's not just getting the amount of labor that's spent there, but the amount of churn time that you get to actually spin those systems up. And tech sprawl, right? All of the extra hardware that people bought, that was taking up space in our data center. It was taking up electricity and cooling in our data center. People hoarded hardware, right? When they stopped using the system, do you think they told IT they were done using it? No, they kept it around. They kept it running because I might need to run that. I might need that for something later. We actually found that throughout our cloud migration process, we decommissioned 20% of what was in our data center because it wasn't being used anymore. So that was a huge cost that we've been patching that. We've been doing firmware upgrades on those systems. People wouldn't share because they'd be hoarding that to themselves, right? So some key objectives that we found for our transformation. We wanted to kickstart agility and speed. We wanted to reduce our hardware acquisition burdens. We wanted to empower our application teams. A very quick example, when we looked at our caseload for our server team, right, and the number of cases that came in, 60% of the cases that they got were from a development team saying, can you restart my server? And do you think that got done when they needed it done, or do you think it waited 3 to 5 days for that SLA? Let IT drive business, not infrastructure. We want to be doing the right thing for the right reasons. Reducing unneeded labor and cost. And also deploy self-service. This was key to us achieving a lot of the efficiencies that we were looking for, is we needed to enable self-service to our application teams. So about a year into our cloud migration, we decided to take another look at what we were doing. We had originally picked another cloud provider. At the time, it was the only enterprise-grade cloud around. Then that cloud entered the healthcare business. Surprise! So it obviously started prompting some questions in our business's mind and in our customer's mind. Are we on the right cloud platform for us? So we started an RFP. We wanted to determine really which cloud provider was the best cloud provider, not just because of business drivers, but for technological drivers too, right? If that cloud provider really was the best solution, well, we're going to have to suck it up because we're going to have to do business, right? If you're going to continue being competitive, we needed to be getting into the cloud. But obviously, we wanted to see for ourselves. Ultimately, GCP was the cloud for us, right? The things that drove this decision was a centralized organization, a top-level organization where you can federate your accounts. Users have one place to log into. They don't have to switch roles. They don't have to switch regions. They don't have to switch accounts to try to access their services or systems. Individual projects for application teams really provide the autonomy. We couldn't do self-service before because you couldn't scale to hundreds of accounts in that other cloud provider, but you couldn't have 300 application teams each have their own account. It was not scalable. So projects really gave that autonomy to our application teams. And then shared VPC concept really allowed us to give that autonomy, but still put enterprise guardrails in place so we could protect the enterprise. We needed to protect egress. We needed to protect ingress. Ease of granting access. There were no difficult roles to have to understand. It was much, much easier to deliver self-service to our application teams. So we had a clear winner in all the areas that we were looking for. In addition to the future technology, Google is highly innovative, and new things are coming out very, very frequently in the data analytics space, everywhere, in machine learning, so in Kubernetes. These were all also important to us, not just for today's needs, but for tomorrow's needs as well. So Issy mentioned building kind of our agile migration factory and how we actually migrate stuff. So we chose a 2-week sprint process where within that first week we would invest heavily on discovery work and really understanding what that application did, how it worked, what it communicated with, what load balancers were in front of it, what DNS names, where someone may have had a static IP address that they hid in their configuration somewhere. And then the second week, we'd get into migration preparation. We'd be building those automated runbooks. We'd be preparing scripts for updating DNS and updating single sign-on, preparing firewall rules, et cetera, with the end of that cycle being the actual migration and then application smoke testing. So this was very successful for us. Since we were going in 2-week sprints, it also gave us the opportunity to really iterate and improve upon our processes. So keys to migration success: start small, right? We didn't start with our most complex production applications to migrate into the cloud. We started with the dev systems, the test systems. The very early dev test systems we did were with friendly application teams that we knew. You all know the difference between the friendly application teams and the non-friendly application teams. Declare small early victories. Get comfortable with the cloud. It's new. It's a big change for everyone, right? So starting small really lets you have that opportunity to understand what you're doing, discover the things, the road bumps you're going to run into, and then iterate and improve on those processes. Building a cloud culture is important, right? The most difficult thing about cloud migration isn't migrating systems. The most difficult thing about cloud migration is changing the people, changing the processes. So we put a lot of focus on that organizationally to be able to improve upon that. Ways we kept up the momentum. We use this as an opportunity to train people on new skills. We gamified migrations. We had prizes. Which application team could migrate the most systems within a month? Which teams would be first into production? Those kind of things. We gave individual projects a code name. We had a lot of fun. We had posters every sprint. In the first phase of our project, every sprint had a movie poster theme to it. So we did a lot of stuff to have fun. We brought lots of food in because everyone loves food, right? Back to cost savings, right? I mentioned that as one of our primary drivers. How did we obtain cost savings? When you talk to people about the cloud, the first impression is, oh, that's expensive, right? Our migration to the cloud, we had lean migration teams that were highly focused on what they were doing. We up-leveled our existing IT staff. It wasn't a cleanse out the whole IT department and bring in new skills, bring in new people. It was bringing in people from areas that would otherwise be impacted, right? When you're going to cloud, your storage team goes away, your networking team reduces a lot, your OS teams reduce, your VMware team. We brought a lot of those infrastructure teams into our migration program, got them trained up, and they were some of the people that were leading our actual migration activities. We right-sized VMs. We found a lot of stuff in our data center where this database server. It was a physical database server. It had 128 cores and 512 gig of memory, and guess what? It was running at 1 or 2% CPU, and the database only had 8 gig of memory that it was running. So there's a lot of stuff oversized because they never knew what they might need in the future. Again, I mentioned that we decommissioned about 20% of systems. We never had to migrate them because in talking to the application teams, they weren't really using them. And when they found out, you know, we were covering cloud costs year 1, but year 2, they'd have those costs. It made them think twice about whether they really needed that system that they were hoarding anymore, especially when we were giving them the keys to be able to build new systems as they needed them. So 20% reduction in our VM footprint that we never had to migrate. Something else that was critical to our savings that was really a culture change for our application teams is only power on your systems when you need them. Most application teams, especially a lot of our legacy applications, they don't do frequent releases. They're not hammering away at their environment, their lower environments frequently. So our lower environments are powered off 70–80% of the time. Nights, weekends, business days when they're not using them. We put automated processes in place to be able to let application teams tag their instance, so at the time they choose every day, that system powers off, and gave them the choice of whether it powers on automatically the next day or not. So definitely powering off your instances when you don't need them is key to saving money in the cloud. I give the analogy of always telling my kids to turn off the lights when they leave the room. Do the same thing with your servers. When you leave for the day and you're not using it, power it off. If you're going to be in meetings all day, don't power that server on. Agility was also a driver, right? Our time to cloud dramatically decreased. We moved thousands of systems into the cloud within a couple years, and that included taking about a 3 to 4 month hiatus to change our cloud provider. A lot of work went into that. Just-in-time infrastructure, application teams have the ability to spin up instances when they need them, spin them down, delete them if they don't need them. Again, they have self-service, no more cumbersome procurement process. Application teams have a cloud budget, and they choose how to spend that cloud budget. If they are going to exceed that budget, and it just happens to be in the same bucket as their labor bucket. So they really have the ability to switch a lot of levers to be able to, for departments to be able to make their budgets. And application teams feel empowered. The application teams feel empowered. So really feel empowered to be in control of their destiny. They can do what they need done. They can achieve their business goals without relying on infrastructure teams. And people were convinced. People who are worried about their role are excited about the new technology and learning new skills while still at Cardinal Health. App teams who are worried about the cloud love their newfound empowerment and agility. And compliance teams worried about regulations now realize that HIPAA, FDA, GDPR, these are all easier to achieve in the cloud, not more difficult. There's so much more technology available to you in the cloud than you could ever build in your own data center. And you will hit speed bumps. Don't expect this to be all roses and cherry on top. You know, everything's not easy. People are going to have fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You need to remove that fear, uncertainty, and doubt by sharing information, being open and honest with your people. We established a cloud center of expertise to really uplift the entire organization. We held training events. We partnered with Google to bring in experts from across the field, whether that was Kubernetes or infrastructure or machine learning or data analytics. We really brought our teams up to speed on current technology. And really, you need to energize the base of your teams. From a process perspective, industry validation, compliance, updating SOPs. There is a lot of process things that come up that you need to adapt to, right? And being flexible and adaptive are important aspects of moving to the cloud. it's not going to be, we joke that, when we find something that works and find a standard that, hey, that's our standard this month, but we don't know what's going to come next month because we don't know what challenges are going to be facing us. From a technology perspective, shared platforms were difficult, right? Shared databases. I know you shouldn't share databases, but our application teams did it, right? Web servers that you may have 15 different applications on. Those are a little bit difficult to move, right? They take a little bit more time. Firewall rules for north-south communication. You need to understand your firewall rules. Ingress and egress proxies. For us, it was legacy SiteMinder, and a lot of that configuration wasn't at the top of everyone's mind because it's been there and sitting for a while. Load balancers can be difficult, and network attached storage. Don't forget about that. You move your machines, guess what? You need to move their network attached storage with it. So NAS and SMB, don't forget about those because we had some surprises there. Lessons learned, we iterated, right? We were continually improving our process after every sprint, making sure that the roadblocks that we ran into, that we don't run into them again. In parallel discovery, don't just try to do all your discovery up front and then move to migration. You won't gain the momentum. You also want to make sure that that you're not overanalyzing things and not progressing because you're trying to do too much discovery. Although I will say too much discovery is a hard thing to achieve, but don't spend too much time overanalyzing things. Automate everything. Issy talked about runbooks. We've gotten to the point towards the end of our migration here that that when it comes to migration time, it's literally someone pushes a button and the migrations occur, DNS is updated, the DNS configuration on the boxes are updated, software is installed, software is uninstalled, and there's very little human interaction needed with migrations because as we ran into things, no one likes to do the same thing more than once or twice. And if you're migrating thousands of systems, you don't want to do the same thing thousands of times, for sure. Make a migration checklist so you don't forget things. And batch your migration waves. Issy talked about 50 to 100. That number really worked well for us. Most of our migration waves were between 50 and 100 systems, and that was very manageable for us. It allowed us to get our scale and our speed, but without having too much that we were overwhelmed. A final note, keep it fun and have pizza, right? Everyone loves pizza. Amazon kind of coined the phrase about the 2-pizza team. That didn't work for us. I like 2 pizzas myself, so I wouldn't get very far by myself. But we really had a lot of fun. We really worked hard, and we ate a lot of food too. So with that, I will hand it over to Issy to share some roadmap items.
Yep. All right, thanks. Great job. Yeah, and we thank Luis and his team for being a great partner for us. When they moved to the first cloud, we were still a startup, and we helped them move to the first cloud. And then we did the second move with them to. The good thing is that the service is free for people who want to move to GCP. The migration service, everything is free as long as you move to the right cloud. I want to set just 1 minute about what was announced today. And again, by the way, Cardinal is one of our good design partners on the next step. So while you've seen now the lift and shift is a very viable possibility for large-scale migrations, we also see more and more customers asking us, hey, but once we move to the cloud, can we get some help in modernizing workloads, making them more containerized? Can we get some of the operational efficiencies of the cloud, developer productivity, et cetera? And many of them have tried and again, we're not talking about cloud native, but rather about existing legacy applications. What can be done there? Commercial off-the-shelf tools, et cetera, software. And when they start to get through this process manually, they find out that it's a very hard and challenging process. And that let us think about what can we do to help those customers not only migrate to the cloud, but also modernize. And I don't have time to elaborate on it. There are actually multiple sessions on that I've given, but just give you a glimpse of what we've basically done. And that was the essence of the announcement that was made in the keynote about Anthos-Migrate, which is we came up with this solution that allows you essentially rely on the infrastructure layer that we talked today for transport and streaming. But in addition to that, we're able to take essentially VMs and essentially strip all the system elements of it, take just the user mode, applications, workload, and essentially convert them into a Kubernetes, detach the networking storage that they've been working with, and the operating system kernel, et cetera, and reconnect them into Kubernetes, or particularly in GKE, networking, storage, et cetera. And what happens is that out of this process, using streaming, but also the transformation, we're now getting really in a zero-touch manner VMs that were running previously on-prem running as actual Kubernetes or actually GKE containers and getting some of the benefits out of the door right away. For instance, you don't have to deal with operating system patches or security. You don't have to deal with all the things that come with a VM-based. Like, for instance, you can get the benefits of networking security. You can get all the benefits of visibility, monitoring, logging. All this comes out of the box without having to deal with anything. And that has been really kind of a jump. Now, once we do that, we can also add what's called sidecar containers and extend the capability or augment it by virtue of, for instance, putting an Istio sidecar, which gives you service mesh capability. Visibility, network security, all this. And all this is done without making any single line of change in the code. Now, this is our first, only, what we call phase one. And it gives you the operational benefits of GKE. And what we are working on, and we'll release soon rather after, is the ability also to leverage the productivity through CI/CD pipelines, and that will be done by actually not only migrating the VMs, but also breaking them down, taking the Docker images, containers, elements out, the artifacts, and being able for you to use image-based management in the right way. So this is coming later, and leveraging the tools that we have today to introspect in Kubernetes the dependencies and use that in order to actually further break down the monolith. This is something that will come down the road. But we don't have much time for that. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of that. We actually are working with a number of design partners to further elaborate and develop the solution. One of them is Cardinal Health. And the interesting thing to keep in mind is that our approach to Anthos-Migrate is such that we want to meet the customer where they are. What I mean by that is that you can actually transform VMs to containers, whether you're on premises, whether you're in another cloud, or whether you're already in GCP but have not migrated yet to GKE. So you can migrate first and modernize later. For instance, Cardinal Health has done thousands of VMs, but they are looking now and further modernizing, and they can do that with Anthos-Migrate from GCP into GKE. We can also, will support the ability to move to GKE on-prem. And then you can, from there on, move from GKE on-prem to GKE, right? And finally, we also support workloads that are running in any other cloud, I mean AWS, and they can move either to GCP or directly into GKE, right? So all options are out there to give you the flexibility you need to decide whether you want to modernize first, migrate later, or vice versa. Are we getting really out of time? We have 1 minute for questions, so thank you very much for listening to us. Okay, we're going to be here for a few minutes if someone wants to come and have some questions offline, but thank you very much for attending today.